of an Olympic Games. But we very much have to work hand in hand, because we can't really say to the Olympic movement that you need to do something if we're not doing it ourselves, for example. So a lot of the three of us work very closely together in embedding sustainability throughout the whole sphere of the Olympics. So from us to everybody that has really a part of us, including the organising committees, the host cities of the Games as well. So Lou asked me to come and speak to you. I've known him for a little while now. We always have great chats, and so it's a pleasure to be here. And I think, Lou, it's meant to be more interactive. You know, you can ask me anything you like, and I'll try and answer it. If I can't, I can take the questions away and find out answers for you and get back to you. Very much open. So is there any topic in particular regarding sustainability? Because I'm quite conscious that sustainability is quite wide, and I could just, you know, ramble on for hours about it and not really look at the stuff that you're interested in.
What are the topics, Julie, that you focus on? Like in a big picture basis, how do you categorize them?
Well, we have an IOC sustainability strategy, which has 5 focus areas, which are climate, sustainable sourcing and resource management, mobility, workforce, and infrastructure and natural sites. But bearing in mind that that was written because of who we are, there's a lot of other topics within sustainability that we were already doing. So this was almost like a filling in the gaps exercise and bolting on a lot of the work where we feel we needed to progress more on. So, for example, a lot of the social development work was already being done. A lot of the education through the Olympic values work and the cultural side of it were already done. And so the IOC strategy complemented that. But those, the focus areas that I just spoke about are really the key focus areas that we help a Olympic movement like an IF, International Sport Federation or National Olympic Committee with. And actually in the, we've just launched what we call the Olympic Agenda. This is a bit of a mouthful, 2020+5, which is basically a roadmap for the whole of the Olympic, from the IOC to the Olympic Games and for the Olympic movement. It was Olympic Agenda 2020, which covered the last 4 years. And then we've just launched 2020+5. So we're carrying it on for another 5 years. And there you'll see, I can send it to you afterwards if you want through Luke, but here you'll see the real key recommendations where we are going to focus on, and sustainability is intertwined throughout all of that. And then there are some very specific recommendations that focus in on sustainability. So that's what we've said are our main focus for the next 5 years.
And in terms of, Julie, maybe you could share a little bit about the on climate, the focus about carbon negativity and, you know, from the IOC and its operations, and then, you know, how that filters out to the actual games, you know, in Paris and
Sure.
LA. And
yeah, well, climate is a massive focus for us. Well, it should be really for everybody in the world, but also for us. And we've made quite a few strong commitments this past year regarding climate, not just for ourselves, but also for the Olympic Games. So we've made a commitment to be carbon positive. And we've also pushed that as a mandatory requirement for future games. So and on top of that, we've also made a commitment to reduce our carbon emissions by 45%. So that's in line with the Paris Agreement and what the UN are telling us that we all should be doing. So we spent a lot of last year doing feasibility studies to make sure that we could actually do that, because we didn't want to, of course, just say that we're doing it and then find that we're struggling. So we've gone through that process and are very happy with our commitments. And now it's basically working hard to make those quite strong commitments. On top of that, we have there's quite a lot of requirements that we look into, which climate is one of those topic areas that just impacts everything that we do and every decision that we do. It's not just about environmental. In fact, I would argue really that climate is such a social issue, really. If we're talking about the impacts of climate change between now and the next 10 to 20 years time. So when we say we're carbon positive, it couples with the reductions that we're making, but also, of course, the offsets for what the residual impacts. And for that, we've just launched, was it last week or the week before? Time's running away with me now, but a program called the Olympic Forest, where we're working with the UN again, United Nations Environment Programme, and also an NGO called TreeAid, to literally do a huge planting program in Africa, and it's part of the Great Green Wall, which is basically this huge project to try and stop desertification in Central Africa. And so we're working with them, where we're going to plant, I think it's 355,000 trees in 90 villages in Senegal and Mali. And the reason we're doing that is because we wanted to, first of all, have a project which didn't just look at planting trees, but also really included the social aspects of that to try and bring more stability and better living for those villages in Africa where they're really suffering because it's literally turned to desert. So we wanted to empower people as well as plant the trees and work with those communities so that they can learn to live off many of these trees. So the species will be adapted to what they need to live off and also make a living off. And the cool thing about that project is that we want to expand it so that anybody within the Olympic movement can be part of it. So you as athletes, if you wanted to, could say, okay, I have a carbon footprint of 100 tons, for example, whatever it might be in 1 year. I want to offset that, and I want to be part of this Olympic forest. So we want to open it up so that anyone within the Olympic movement can feel part of this project as well. So it's kind of complicated actually, but we look to hopefully open that in the next 2 years or so.
That's a huge initiative, massive.
Mm-hmm. I was wondering if, we have athletes on the call, but we also have either aspiring or current sustainability professionals, as well as wearing the athlete hat. So I'm curious, as a sustainability professional working in sports, what, if you could share kind of something that keeps you going and something that is also kind of a challenge?
Yeah, it's funny because I didn't start my career actually in sport at all. I was, when I started my career, I was really concerned about the big industries, so oil and gas and big infrastructure projects. So the first part of my career was actually focused on that. And just by chance, we got the job for the planning applications for the London Olympics. And we thought, oh, let's do that because it's the home games and it will be kind of fun. And then ever since then, I've been in sport. For me, I think what keeps me going is that sometimes you just speak to people because of my role and working with the Olympic movement. Like this morning, for example, I was talking to the Cambodian NOC about doing a project about educating children in sustainability in Cambodia. And then later on, I'm talking to you guys, and I just love that aspect of being able to reach so many people around the world and help them be more sustainable. And knowing that with the International Sport Federation or a National Olympic Committee, they do a lot of work in the communities. So a lot of the work that we do with them has sort of trickle down impacts into the communities. And I love that about sport, because I think sport is just such an amazing platform to be able to do that, not like many other sectors. And then challenges, there's lots if you work in sustainability. I think on a day-to-day basis, sometimes there's a lot of climate change science at the moment, and it's so unbelievably sad what we're doing for the planet. And I get really frustrated that people just don't see that, and they're not making actions in their own life. And that just really frustrates me, because I feel like but this is human nature. I think unless you can actually see it, you don't really feel empowered to do much about it. And I'm getting more and more scared. I think that in 10 years' time, it's going to be too late. And then what do we do? So I guess that's getting worse and worse in my head. And I think if you're a sustainability professional, you sort of, because you read so much every day about things like that, it's, I don't know, it's sort of challenging, I guess. But we have to look at the what we're doing, basically.
Hi, Julie. Just to throw a couple of questions at you from this end. Well, first of all, maybe some of you have heard that in Czech Republic, we had the worst tornado in history last week, in modern European history, which I know for a lot of you USA-based athletes and staff here, tornadoes might seem kind of normal, but here in Europe, I have never even had to consider the possibility of it. And then, yeah, last week was a F3 or F4, just hit a village south of Czech and just wiped the village because, of course, they're not prepared for it. So there, that was huge news. And so it kind of, like you said, it was right in front of me, hitting home close to home, as was the Australian bushfires last year. So I made a post about it, like, come on, like, this is crazy. This is getting insane now. And yeah, it's just interesting because, like what you said, people don't really want to hear about any more doom in this current world. So I found the reaction in terms of how many people engaged with the post I made was absolutely minimal. So, you know, only maybe a handful of people that I know actually care about the climate and are trying to do things. But for the most part of the social media, which is our main source of influence, I think, I just feel like paralyzed. There's not a lot of, the average person just doesn't really want to hear any more about the state of the world as pressing as the climate issues are. So yeah, that was a funny observation. If you had any ideas as how to, you know, avert that or engage people more, I'm always ears trying to learn a better way to communicate.
It's interesting because so the last few months I've been working with a group of NGOs and also the UN on what's the best way to engage people on climate. And I think people at the moment, especially after, you know, what we've gone through with COVID, I feel people are a bit saturated and can't take any more bad news. So what they were saying is that we need to turn it around into more sort of uplifting, like get involved type thing, make it almost like a competition and get people like excited about doing something about climate change instead of, oh God, we're all gonna, like, you know, die in 20 years type thing. And so a lot of research went on, and this is something which in the next few months I'm going to work more on, but trying to come up with a list of maybe 10 actions which people can do in an empowering sort of way. And I think something, you know, as athletes, maybe it's things like the ice bucket challenge a few years ago, it's getting people to do stuff like that, which is really catchy and just people want to do it on social media. It's finding something like that which we can try and get a global sort of movement on, rather than talking about the sad stuff. So happy, once we've done all that work, it won't be for a few months now, but happy to maybe share it with you as a group so that we can start trying to, well, see whether it works first of all. Hopefully it does. But the campaign has already started. Actually, it's called Count Us In, and they spent a lot of time even debating what should we call it, and they came up with Count Us In because it's about empowering people to come into something that's sort of more fun and, let's just stop traveling or something like that. So we'll see how it goes.
And then Luke, you said you had 2 questions, or was that it?
Yeah, that was the main thing on my mind. So yeah, thanks for that information. Yeah, please provide links when they come through to this Count Us In movement.
Yeah, definitely.
We have a question from Jackie, whose internet is poor. So can you read? You see that, Julie, in the chat, or I can read it?
How is the IOC balancing or prioritizing engaging the public versus motivating host cities? Sort of jumping.
I can read it. I'll read it out loud. How is the IOC balancing or prioritizing engaging the public versus motivating host countries to make meaningful infrastructure changes to their public transit and energy sectors, for example? What is the priority from the IOC's perspective?
Oh, both. Definitely. Definitely both. So, for example, the infrastructure changes. So we've now got some quite strong, we call them the legacy priorities. And this is focusing on the infrastructure. And actually now city host countries cannot build a new sports venue unless there is a very, very strong, clear legacy reason to do so. So there's a lot of work that goes on between us and the host cities before they've even applied, as it were, to become a host city. So we go through this phase with interested candidatures who are looking to win hosting the games, and we do a full infrastructure, I suppose, inventory in a way, to go through all of their plans with them on infrastructure. And then when they're awarded the games, we then work with them all the way through. And this includes temporary infrastructure, permanent infrastructure, public transport, looking at their energy, especially now linked to the climate commitments. So that's definitely a priority. And then the public, we're working a lot more recently on engaging the public in a more digital, holistic way. So it was that we had, the Olympic Channel and Olympic.org and blah, blah, blah. And we've combined them all recently to have one proper digital platform where we're going out in a more comprehensive manner on engaging the public. And that will grow and grow and grow over the next coming months and years, because it's part of the Olympic Agenda 2020+5 to really engage more in the public through the digital platforms, but also through the community levels and the host cities as well.
And so just following up on that, will on Olympic.org, on the Olympic Channel, will there be, vignettes about your climate work, about athletes, maybe Olympians who are getting involved?
I hope so.
Yeah. All right. I'll take that as a yes.
Yes. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, because we're in a bit of a transition, and this year is really tricky because we've got Tokyo with all the challenges with Tokyo, and then Beijing so close behind afterwards. There is a bit of a focus this year on just getting through this year, but definitely we plan to do a lot on the climate and the Olympic forest and everything that we're doing across all of those platforms. And I've got a couple of projects which won't be launched until later this year, but often and previously I've written, you know, a tool or a guide, for example, and it's gone out as, you know, a guide actually, and I'm transforming that to make it a lot more interactive with the public and communities, and really getting athletes to champion those particular things. So I've got one guide, for example, and it's called How to Be a Sustainable Champion, and it's more about what as individuals we can do to be more sustainable, with of course a sport slant. So it's like, you know, what can you do when you travel to see your local team heroes or the Olympics or whatever, and then what can you do in your own home. And I'm building a portfolio of athletes to actually champion that as well and be part of that. So I think this is definitely the direction that we're moving in. Because I mean, people, as you all know, people listen to athletes a lot more than, you know, if I randomly went out and said something.
That's the ethos of eco athletes, in fact.
Exactly.
So thanks for the plug.
Well, if you want to be involved in this, how to be a champion, then please let me know.
I think you'd have some volunteers. And in fact, two of our champions who are not on this Zoom are part of your movement, who are Shay Smith from Canada, bobsledder and Olympic sprinter, and then Hannah Mills from Team GB, who is a sailor.
Yeah, actually, Shay and Hannah are on my ambassador program as well, so I work a lot with them. They're great. Yeah, so anyone else who wants to be part of that, the more the merrier.
Hi. So I will ask a question, and now probably I just want your opinion about it. It's more. I don't think if it's a really question, but I will try to explain my point of view. So the World Health Organization released a plan for healthier citizens for between 2018 and 2030. So the plan says something like this: more active people for a healthier world. But if the world is getting sicker, how can we get more healthier people? So I would like to ask you what you think about multi-sectoral partnerships and systemic approach and cross-government strategies. Do you think this will be the main goal to change people behavior? Because behavior change or human behavior change is very hard to achieve. What do you think about this?
I think that we can't do it actually unless we create multi-sectorial partnerships. I think it's impossible to try and just stay within sport and try and fix things. We've got to, so if you're a National Olympic Committee, for example, you've got to use the sphere of your influence, and it's not just about the local clubs and the sport community, but actually it's working with the governments, and it's working with partnerships and NGOs to get this whole partnership and multi-sectorial going. Because if we don't do that, I think that we're in a way wasting what sport can do. Because if you look at the way that sport is, actually we can influence the government, I believe. There's several sports sectors, and if you look at the way this Olympic Games works with the host country and city, it's so linked to what we need to do, and it requires what we need to do in the future requires this government to work as well, to reinforce their policies and strategies, because there'll always be some people who won't want to follow. So it has to come with the government side. A lot of it we can't do without our partnerships with the IOC. So we have a lot of partnerships with people like the UN, and we really work together with them, mostly technical. So to say, you know, work with them, say what needs to be done and what can we do together, and they come in with the technical expertise. on top of that, we also need a huge business engagement because, for example, if you look at the carbon footprint of most of sport, in what's called their scope 3 emissions, which is where most of our emissions are, it's things like travel and procurement and what we're buying. So if we don't influence people like the airline industry or the sport equipment manufacturers and the suppliers, we're never going to be truly sustainable. So for me, it all has to come hand in hand. And WHO, we work with WHO actually, specifically on water quality, on air quality, and a bit of healthy living as well. They're really engaged to see the value of sport actually working with us. Not sure if that really answered your question or not, but
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Because this multi-sectoral approach, I think, is essential and fundamental. Because it's I don't like it was said before. Me as an athlete, or I can have a small group of persons that I can reach because they are not all available, mental or physical, to accept what I have to say. So we need a different approach.
there is, I've been working on an interesting project. I won't say the name of the sponsor, but with one of the sponsors who I felt needed more engagement with what society was wanting. And so I brought in a group of sport federations and also athletes actually. And we've been working with this sponsor a lot on, okay, it's not just the IOC wanting this, actually it's sport, it's society, and it's the athletes. And through working with them with all of these sectors, we actually, managed to have some really constructive work done on them. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if it wasn't for bringing in the athletes and the sport federations so that we're more of one voice. I think that's really important.
Do want to be respectful of Julie's time. I also want to welcome in Brianna Salvatore-Duick, our champion from the United States and basketball. But any last questions for Julie? All right, Julie, I have one quick last question for you. England, Ukraine, Saturday night.
Well, I have another question.
All right, go for it.
England, Germany, a few days ago.
You can't look past now. You got to get past that.
I was amazed.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and your insights. And
always a pleasure.
Yeah, and welcome to the Eco Athletes world. We hope we look forward to continuing this and hopefully partnering with you guys. Yeah,
keep it all up because your voice really, really matters. And we need you all very much. So thank you, Lou.
Thanks, Julie.
Thanks, Julie.
Bye.
Bye.
And I figure, excuse me, Julie mentioned sharing a resource after, just a little bit more about their overall framework. So we'll send out kind of a distribution email